going on, everybody? You are live with Osiris. Welcome to the Author's Lounge. The world is filled with storytellers, and I, along with my guests, are here today in the Author's Lounge to help educate and inspire the young generation of writers and creators. Now, my guests are professionals in publishing, writers from a wide range of formats, and successful entertainers. They will provide beneficial advice on what to do and what not to do on your path to success. So, without further ado, I'll present to you our next guest. Let's go. You never know how you are going to get in contact with people or who you are going to get in contact with. It can happen at any given moment, and sometimes they may even reach out to you. And that is what this case is that I'm referencing. So my guest today reached out to me via the social media, and in the way that she came to me made me feel like, oh my goodness, like you're pitching an idea to me. I'm normally the one pitching ideas to people to try to get them on, but she was so kind, so genuine, and I'm very much looking forward to today. So our guest is a best-selling, award-winning author. She has over 66 published books with multiple in the horizon going to be going for publication. She also has books in 36 languages. She has been traditionally published. She is also a successfully published. She is also a successful self-published author as well. So she has experience in that regards. She's appeared on shows such as the Oprah Winfrey Show when Oprah was doing her thing, and she's also appeared on the Today Show. So she's no stranger to being on camera. She's no stranger to success, but she also wants to help out people to the best that she can with her work. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Jan Yager. What's going on,
Thank you
ma'am?
so much. I also want to share that I was on The View.
Oh, wow.
I think I'm one of their only non-celebrity guests, and it was really a fabulous
Wow.
event because they made the whole show about friendship, which is one of my areas of expertise.
Yeah.
And I truthfully, I wish they'd go back to doing things like that because
Hmm.
each of the segments was tied into that. And Meredith Vieira was the main host at that point.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing.
Of course, I used to love watching The View. It was something that I had watched for many, many years. So I think particularly around the time that I would watch The View was like when it was Barbara Walters. I mean, rest her soul, and then Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg, and I think Sherry Shepherd was on there at the time when I was watching it, and Elizabeth Hasselbeck, but she had since left. But I know the show has gone through many phases, but that just kind of shows you how long ago I used to watch the show. And now I kind of watch just clips of the show because I'm busy like recording my own stuff, so I don't watch as much. But anyway, not to divert it, I think that's wonderful that you've also been able to be on a show like The View. But let's talk about this view, the view I have right in front of me. You,
Oh, thank you.
of course, you and your success and your books and what that has meant. I also forgot to mention, right, and maybe you can elaborate on it better, on who you were able to beat out for 6 months to
Oh,
have and obtain
sure.
that
Yeah,
title.
well, it was exciting because for 6 months I was number one in the Kindle India format. And fortunately, I took a screenshot of it. And I was beating out Harry Potter and Dr. Covey's classic Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. So
Mhm.
I not only have a screenshot of me as number one, but as the other titles below me. So, so that was exciting.
Yeah.
But hey, all good things sadly often come to an end. So
Mhm.
it's now I think number 105
Mhm.
in India, but 105 out of the tens of thousands of books that they publish is still
Yeah.
very exciting.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not to undermine anything. Being on top in anything for any period of time is a success in itself. Half a year consistently, and you're not even somebody that's deemed a celebrity, it speaks volumes to you. And
Sure.
while on that topic, right, you being on the show like The View and not having a celebrity status, you having thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of books sold under yourself, you are showing everyone, right, that it's all about consistency. It's all about being intentional, and it's all about showing that you don't have to have a certain level of status in order to truly be a success. And while on that topic, so I understand that you were also traditionally published at one point in time, and now you are self-published. So let's start with that. How did that come about with
No, but
you?
I also I do want to correct you that I continue to also publish with commercial houses in
Oh,
addition to self-publishing.
that's right.
And,
That's
and,
right.
and the reason why I'm correcting you is that I do book coaching, and some of
Hmm.
the clients will say to me, what should I do? Should I commercially publish or should I self-publish?
Hmm.
And I say, take it on a book by book basis.
Hmm.
You don't have to become the self-published author or the commercially published author. So,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to correct you about
Oh,
that.
no, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I certainly want to make sure that I have all of my facts in check. So if I'm making any mistakes, please let me know.
Oh, no, no, not a mistake, but it is true. A lot of authors who, once they go to self-publishing, they absolutely don't want to, go the commercial route anymore. So, as I said, I feel it should be a book by book decision.
For
But I
sure.
also wanted to factor in, my memoir, looking
Hmm.
backward, going forward, reflections on a writer's life. One of the reasons I wrote it, and it's my journey as a writer interspersed around my personal life,
Hmm.
is that I find with memoirs, if you're not a celebrity, it's really hard to find a story that you can relate to.
Right.
And Stephen King wrote a wonderful writer's biography, autobiography, but he's Stephen King,
Right.
So continuing the thought you shared about the fact that, I'm not, J.K. Rowling, who, is wealthier than the king.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's room for authors who do the job well and keep at it. And it doesn't have to, I mean, James Patterson, he's got, it's off the charts how many books he's sold. But there's room for novelists who are just starting out or, sell 10,000 copies
Right.
or, 1,000 books. I mean, it's quality.
Absolutely. It is all about quality work. And I know in a business where there's a large focus on the numbers, and whether that's the numbers in terms of books that you've sold or numbers of followers that you have on social media, or the just the sheer numbers of books that you have in your published catalog. I think it all comes down to what does your book represent, and then what do you represent as an author. Oh, go ahead.
But I do want to say that lately I find saying I've published 66 books has been backfiring because there's this attitude, well, they can't be really good books if you've written so many, and why didn't you get it right the first time? Well, first of all, they're on very different topics and different genres.
Interesting.
But that negativity inspired me to ask my new best friend. I do not use it for writing. I use it for quick research.
Mhm.
I asked ChatGPT, I said, please give me a list of well-regarded writers who have published more than 50 books. And it spits out in just a few minutes this amazing list. And I actually went in and said, Chat, you're missing Dr. Jan Yager.
There it is. Yeah.
She's published 66 books, so it was kind of fun that they
Mhm.
redid the list and, added me. But I feel that's important. You know, Isaac Asimov, who I was fortunate enough to interview, he wrote I, Robot. By the time he passed away, he published over 500 books.
Wow.
So we shouldn't see being prolific as a negative, you know, as
For
long
sure.
as it's quality. And you know, and also I may look younger than I am, but
Hmm.
hey, you know, I started at 10. My
Hmm.
first novel I published at 10. My first published book with Scribner was 27. But, you know, am I able to say it? It's hard to get it out of my mouth. You know, I am 76.
Hmm. Well,
So, you know,
yeah. I mean,
you know,
you,
you
yep.
know, I just write. People say to me, how do you write so many books? And I say, it's hard for me not to write. I know
Yeah.
for other people it's hard to write, but it's hard for me not to write.
No, for sure. Once a writer, always a writer, and that, to your point, in case regarding, hey, Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, or anybody who has been in the business but they've been at the forefront as a representation of their books, it's at a point with those individuals where their name is what you see first, and whatever the title is follows. You just have this idea that, oh, okay, if Stephen King's writing a book, it must be horror, or if J.K. Rowling is writing a book, it must be fantasy based. And so, but I think what's really important for authors to know, I think this is also applicable to entrepreneurs in general, but specifically talking about authors, is understanding what they are, who they are, what they write about, and that branding. I know I've talked about branding several times in the past. I think it's certainly important. But for you, because you've written such an extensive amount of books and you've written in different genres, I'm wondering. I once talked to this author. Her name is Joanna Penn, and Joanna once told me that she had to operate in two different pen names in order to really separate the entity. Some people don't do that though. Some people write in one genre. Some write in a multiple catalog of genres
Sure,
under one pen name,
sure.
and they still work. So for you, have you always operated under one pen name, or do you have multiple?
Well, there's two ideas that you bring up. The first is that after when my husband and I met and got married in 23 days, so we made a deal that he would take my religion and I would take his name.
Hmm.
So at that point, I had 5 published books, and I suddenly went from Janet Barkis to Jan Yager.
Hmm.
So that was initially a real jar, and I didn't realize it was going to be so hard on my career because I basically was starting from scratch as
Right.
Jan Yeager. But the other issue is this. I know, now I have 8 books on time management. I have 6 books on friendship.
Hmm.
I have 5 novels. 3 are thrillers and 1 is psychological. I have 5 children's books. I know that I would probably be more successful financially if I wrote on one topic
Hmm.
and, you know, really exploited that niche.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, I like to move around from topic to topic. I don't have a huge number of topics. I'd say it's about 5 or 6.
Hmm.
But some of the nonfiction writers, especially, they'll have that lane and they prefer to stay in that lane.
Hmm.
So, you know, so that's a, you know, and also so much of it is emotional
Yeah.
in a positive way. And we were
Hmm.
talking before we started the recording that I just decided, because I do teach college, I'm very proud to be an adjunct. For many years, I was full time, but took time off to raise my sons and went back as a part time adjunct. And now
Hmm.
I'm, teaching multiple courses, but I'm still considered part time.
Hmm.
But I notice with my students that they love anything visual. So even though I've written one of the top textbooks on victimology, the study of crime victims,
Yeah.
I realized I needed to create a short documentary.
Hmm.
And I chose a subject that's very under underexposed. The working title of the documentary is the Forgotten,
Yeah.
and the subtitle is The Ones Left Behind, and
Hmm.
it's about the family and friends of those who have been killed. But it's not like I sat down and said, "Oh, I got to do a documentary," or
Yeah.
"Oh, what's the topic going to be?"
Hmm.
It was just something that I felt there was a need for it.
Right.
So you know, and that's usually what happens with my books.
Hmm.
I write something that I don't want to be repetitive. I love movies, I love streaming, but how often, especially lately, have you tried to watch something and you say to your partner, "Wow, this is so derivative," or
Yeah.
"Boy, I've seen this before." So
Exactly.
I feel very strongly that you've got to do new things. You've got to have new research, new information, new
Mm.
insights, so that someone, yeah, I feel a great deal of respect for my readers. I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to bore them. You know, I want them to get something fresh and important out of what they read, whether it's a novel, entertaining wise,
Mhm.
or you know, nonfiction.
Yeah, and I want to also add, well, not add, but ask as well. So, on that topic about pretty much of relevancy and of status, because of this, the way that the business is molded, that everything is about either what you have or what you represent or what you've done, and you are no stranger to it. You were on the View, you were on the Today Show, you were on Oprah, and yet you still had people challenging you and your worth. To me, that's a little, the irony in that is a little bit confusing. Not from you to me, but me thinking about she's done so much and it's still questioned. So I'm wondering, right after you appeared on Oprah,
Well,
or,
Osiris, I don't think my works question. I'm going to say something very controversial. There is ageism,
I see. Yeah.
and sadly, I found that
Hmm.
out with the media. I won't say the name of the show, but I guess I was in my 50s at the time, and this major show called me, and I had already been on all the major shows multiple times, including Good Morning America. So they wanted me on as a friendship expert. So it was all set to go, and then the producer says to me, "By the way, what's your age?" And I told her my age. And she said, "Sorry, but we want an expert who's the same age as our target audience."
Mm.
So I told a couple, so she turned me down. So I told a couple of people about this, and one of my friends said to me, "You should have said to her, I'm 25, because that's how many years at that point I've been studying friendship."
Yeah. No,
You know, like, who cares what my chronological age is? I have 25 years of knowledge, you
for
know.
sure.
I think that there are those mysterious aspects to it, you know. I mean,
Hmm.
I love going on LinkedIn and I see people in their 40s, especially 40s and 30s, who have monetized their expertise
Yeah.
in such a huge way. And I'm very impressed, but I grew up in the 60s
Hmm.
where you were, rah rah, change the world, no thought about becoming a billionaire.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure.
But, yeah,
Okay. Well, on that note,
but I cut off what you were going to say. What were you going to say?
oh,
I
what I
want to
was,
hear your thought about
oh
that.
yeah, no, what I was going to say is I just found it interesting, right, that you have all of this success, and yet people still want to question. Like I was thinking about the books, right? Well, why do you have so many books that you not get it right the first time? Yet, and I know that's just a matter of perspective because it doesn't necessarily the more experience you have in a business, the more you will have. And so I think that mindset is a bit of a probably a small minded mindset. And for me, I'm thinking,
Sure.
right, like regarding you and regarding your success, that you have a lot to teach. You've been doing this for an extended period of time, but you also have a wealth of knowledge that you're able to provide that is helpful. And speaking of which, because you work with commercially, you run an indie house, an indie publishing house. You also work with commercially published houses, and you understand the concept of getting there. Do you have any books, or are you working on any books that speaks to how to get from, hey, I have a book, to, okay, I want to get it published, but I want to have it published through a traditionally published house? It's more of a rhetorical question because I know that answer, but this is more for the audience. So, but do you have
Oh,
one of
sure.
those?
Well, I'm actually working on a book called how to write a winning book proposal.
Nice.
And in the book will be several examples that I have personally used to sell books.
Hmm.
And also, just recently, I brainstormed with an editor at one of the top indie houses that's rather, it's got a long history, but even though they're an indie house, they're more commercial in terms of size and scope. And he told me what he thinks a basic proposal should have. And so in other words, I always make sure I update things. And my most recent book that's coming out with Johns Hopkins University Press in February 2026, it's called The Adjunct's Handbook, and I'm very excited about it. And the fun thing about continuing to publish with commercial as well as my own houses is, they are amazingly organized. I
Yeah.
mean, just yesterday, I got an email from someone whose only job, because they publish a couple of hundred books a year,
Hmm.
his only job is contacting new authors or authors of new books and handling getting blurbs,
Hmm.
advanced blurbs. Now, he didn't know that he was dealing with someone who's been at this for a long time. So he
Right.
said in his email,
Uh-huh.
if you need us to suggest people or here's a template of what to ask. So I wrote back and said, no worry, I have 4 people who already have committed to wanting to read the book and giving a blurb, including the president of a college. So I'll get that information to you.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that that book was sold on a proposal. And the important thing about my book about how to write a winning proposal that I want to share with your listeners is that proposal was written for a different university press
Hmm.
2 years before. I was shattered when they, for whatever reasons, weren't going to go forward.
Hmm.
So I then pitched it to another publisher.
Yeah.
He said, this isn't right for my house, but I love what you're doing,
Hmm.
and I know someone who might be perfect for this and the perfect house. So I was very pragmatic. I said, I have to get an advance up front.
Yep.
Ask him if he wants my book, give me an advance. Otherwise, I don't even want to send him the proposal. So he comes back and says, yes, they'll consider an advance. He wants to see the proposal. Now, once I got him the proposal and he loved it, it was 6 more months going back and forth
Hmm.
with readers and with input. So people who aren't in the business don't realize how much a proposal can be reshaped
Yeah.
and how much effort goes into the proposal. It is definitely harder to write a good proposal than a finished book
Interesting.
because you're selling the sizzle. Okay,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to say you're selling the sizzle and not the steak because I'm a vegetarian. So I'll say you're selling the sizzle and not the impossible burger.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it's so powerful, and that's the other thing that anyone listening needs to know. People will write an entire book, but you still have to write a proposal based on the book because the the salespeople are going to read that proposal. That's going to be their way of pitching the book to the major chains and the indie bookstores,
Mhm.
to the the wholesalers. If they're going to take any kind of bulk orders, although we sadly see that the amount of square footage at the wholesalers is shrinking for books,
For
which makes
sure.
me very sad.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. The other book I'm working on is, and the title keeps changing, but it's How to Use LinkedIn
Hmm.
to Advance Your Relationships, Career, etc. And I know there are a million books on this topic. I've even sold one for an author many years ago to HarperCollins India
Yeah.
to do his book. He's based in Europe, in
Hmm.
English, in India, but LinkedIn keeps changing. The rules are changing.
Hmm.
The way you can really make it work for you. One of my most exciting experiences was this week. I met a wonderful woman, Jamie Engel. She's a powerhouse. She and I had a Zoom call. We met through LinkedIn in August of 2024.
Hmm.
And she was going to be doing a talk on screenwriting versus books
Yeah.
at a library in Tampa where I've relocated to. So we finally met, and I got to meet her, and my husband and I were there. We had a quick lunch, a dinner in between her two presentations. We stayed for her presentation,
Hmm.
and that to me is the ideal way. And she's been such a source of wonderful information over the last year, and
Yeah.
hopefully she's found what I share with her useful too. But that's one of my favorite LinkedIn success stories.
Yeah.
That it's hopefully becomes a friendship, but it's been a very worthwhile business relationship.
Mm. LinkedIn is, to me, has been one of the best platforms I could have ever invested my time into. I didn't realize to the extent of how impactful that would be for me, like my social circle, and to what has been able to do even for my show when I came back to social media, because I stepped away from social media altogether, and it was only recently, as recent as almost it was about 10 months ago, because my wife, she had been trying just to convince me, hey, go back to social media. You actually have a business platform. You can go and propose because of what you're doing as an author and what you're doing as an entertainer. You should do it. And I ignored it, but I eventually just said, you know what, let's do it. And I went to Instagram, and then I went over into I'm familiar. I didn't want to do TikTok because there was politics surrounding TikTok that I did not want to be involved with.
Sure.
And I also understood that what I was doing at the time versus what TikTok viewerships tend to look at, it wasn't in alignment. And so I decided not to do that, but I went to TikTok. I'm sorry, I went the Instagram route. I was already on YouTube, had been doing YouTube since 2007. That took different shapes and sizes, but I've been doing content creation with YouTube for almost 20 years to this day. Um, and
Wonderful.
but oh yes, and then I went over onto Twitter, or X as people know it now, and then I went over to LinkedIn. I only used the LinkedIn because my very first guest on the show, who was a friend of mine, she was. I wanted to tag something of her so she can also have some more exposure with the show, and she was actively only using LinkedIn. I had no clue how to use LinkedIn. Cool. I created a quick account, and I decided, well, I had the account created, but I had never used it. And so, but I decided, I have an account. Let me just tag her in it. And everything else became magic because I started to quickly realize that LinkedIn is a business platform. It is a platform where you can actually make immense amount of connections in high quantity. And once I learned that, I learned, okay, I'm gonna use this platform specifically for this, to meet business people, meet other entrepreneurs, meet other authors, entertainers, build a relationship with them and make a connection with them. And if they would like to get on, cool. If not, I at least have a connection with them. And I use the other platforms for
Sure,
other marketing strategies. But anyway, that about me. I just thought to mention that because it is important to know. So I ask you a couple more questions and then
sure.
I'll let you on your way, Doctor. So with what you've worked on and having your books in 36 languages, I'm sure by the end of this year it'll probably hit 40 languages. You're certainly well on your way
I'm
to.
trying.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's hard to get books in different languages for anybody, and so I'm curious to know what was that process for you to get your books not in just in one or two languages, but you know what? Let's shoot for more. Let's just keep climbing. What was that like?
Okay. Well, when I was 25 years old, right before that, I was working at Macmillan Publishing Company. I was in the school division. I talk about it in my memoir because my history is a little bit convoluted because I was a fine arts major. I'm
Mhm.
also an artist. And then I went to graduate school in psychiatric art therapy, decided that wasn't the right career for me. I was visiting my sister who was working at a company on Third Avenue.
Yeah.
And I said, what am I going to do with my life? I was 23 at the time. And she said, well, Macmillan Publishing Company is up the street. Why don't you go get a job there? I said, no, you can't do that. So in those days, you could actually walk into a building and go to the HR department. So quickly, I'll tell you that they had just laid off 1,000 people.
Wow.
And she said to me in the HR, there's an editor who needs an assistant. Would you do that? So anyway, I went to see Nancy. She said, can you start Monday? So I did.
Hmm.
So for 2 years, I worked in the school division at Macmillan.
Hmm.
But I always wanted to get into what's called the trade book publishing.
I see.
So I interviewed Barney Rossett, who was the legendary head of Grove Press,
Hmm.
for an article, a freelance article that came about because I was working out during my lunchtime, and one of the women, when I'm doing jumping jacks,
Hmm.
said she just had a new magazine and was looking for writers. Anyway, so I interviewed Barney for this article on who's who in East Hampton because he's a publisher and he has a house in East Hampton.
Yeah.
And he says to me, and I am getting in a long-winded way about how I know foreign rights. So Barney, now this is 1973. The women's movement is not even in full speed.
Hmm.
So he says to me at the end of the interview for the article, if you're willing to make my coffee and answer the phone, I'll teach you anything you want to learn about the book business.
Yeah.
And he offered to double my salary at Macmillan. So I said yes. Now, I was ahead of the time because I called up a former high-powered person from the company who was no longer there. And I said, is this on the up and up?
Hmm.
And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said if he had anything other in mind, he'd just directly say it. He doesn't have to hire you for that.
Right.
So he was a perfect gentleman. I got the job and I became director of foreign rights.
That's awesome.
So Barney taught me the system that Grove was using, and they used a co-agent system.
Hmm.
And in those days they only had 6 co-agents in Germany, the Netherlands, France, the UK. So I got in touch with all the co-agents, but I also learned how to pitch directly.
Yeah.
So Scribner was going to be publishing my book on the history of vegetarianism, my very first sale. And I said to myself, and this is so important for everyone listening to this interview, I said to myself, I wanted to sell it to the UK. So I said to my publisher, to myself, what publisher in England is like Scribner? And it was Routledge and Keegan Paul.
Yeah, yeah.
So I called up the editor in chief and I told him that I had written The History of Vegetarianism and Scribner was going to be publishing it. Would he like to buy the UK rights? So even though Scribner had the foreign rights, I wanted to do the legwork to help them. So I mailed the manuscript and he immediately bought it. And he brought me to the UK. I was the first author that they had brought for a tour. Now,
Yeah.
the fun thing that I talk about in my memoir is that he had just moved in with his girlfriend and his mother had passed away and she had a house in Kensington in London. So he said, and I was a freelance writer at that point. By then I had left Grove and I was working full time as a writer. So he said, instead of staying in a hotel, why don't you just stay in my mother's house? I said, fine. And he said, you can stay as long as you like. And I toured throughout the UK and Edinburgh and doing speaking engagements, the BBC. It was amazing. Little did he know I was going to stay for a couple of months.
Oh, wow.
But what I did is because I was already in Europe, I was already working on my follow-up book, which was the study of crime victims. So I was using that London experience as my base of operation. I interviewed the head of Scotland Yard. I went to Paris and interviewed the police officers. I went to the Netherlands, interviewed the police, interviewed crime victims, ex-offenders. So I learned the power of foreign rights, that a lot of writers, don't look at the money. The guy offered me a couple of hundred for the Albanian rights, and I said, great, I'm fine with it. It's always against future earnings. So,
Yeah, yeah.
if it's a bestseller, I'll get more money. But the important thing is, I think about, and this is what writers have to think about, just think about people in whatever language or country you sell your book into,
Yeah.
reading your book and being, exposed to your thoughts, your ideas, your research, your story, if it's fiction. And, whether it's Romania or Germany, Greece, Spanish, there are, in my book, Foreign Rights and Wrongs, which I just updated. It's available as an ebook, print, or audiobook. I list 61 major languages that you could get into.
Oh,
There's
good.
actually about 100, but some of them, the reading publics are not large enough that they even, are going to go to the trouble to translate. Now, AI has opened a whole can of worms to the translation process. I, as an experiment, I'm not in Danish, and it's bothered me. So I took my short little book and called The Cantaloupe Cat, illustrated by Mitzi Lyman. So there's only a few words on each page. So I decided to use Google Translate to turn it into Danish. And it's called Cantaloupe Catten. But what I did is I then went to a client who's in Copenhagen, who's Danish, and I sent her the translation that I had done. And I said, would you look it over and make any necessary corrections, which she did.
That's good.
So it was a joint effort.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of ways now to get into other languages, but you got to make sure that you're always, whether it's English or any other language, that quality and authenticity and reliability is the key.
Oh, no, I'm with you.
And that's a very long answer
Oh, no, no worries. No
to
worries.
your one question.
No, no worries, but I think it warranted a breakdown. You reminded me, right? Because when I published a book for one of my authors, and we decided to put it in Spanish and market it to and market it within the Mexican country, within Mexico, because she's her family, many people in her family reside in Mexico. And so we decided, okay, let's do it in Spanish. We understand there's different types of Spanish. So let's do it in the Spanish, the closest to your native tongue. And so I hired an editor who specialized in Mexican Spanish. That might sound silly to people who don't understand this. They might just understand Spanish is Spanish, but I understand there's Spain Spanish, there's Mexican Spanish, and that's the extent of what I can recall from the top of my
Sure,
head. Right.
sure,
But so I hired someone who specifically
sure.
specialized in Mexican Spanish, and after she translated the entire book into Spanish, I then spoke with my sister-in-law, who's also Mexican, and her first language is Spanish, Mexican Spanish and specifics. And so I had her review the book, and then I had my wife also review it as well,
Oh, wonderful.
to let me know, hey, because my wife is also Mexican, and seeing it, hey, but Spanish is not my wife's first language; it's her second. And whereas my sister-in-law, that's her first language. So they both read it and everything checked out. And but to your point, if you're going to use like a software to transcribe it, make sure you have possibly maybe a human being who is fluent in that language to authenticate
Sure,
it for
definitely.
you.
And right. And the other thing I want to tell people is, I mean, I'm going to do a co-op exhibit again in a year or so. But in my book, Foreign Rights and Wrongs, I talk about the co-op exhibits that you could be part of. Um, Believe it or not, even though it's a little book and there weren't many words, that process is time consuming, especially if you're going to do it the right way. So, my preference is to get a foreign publisher to buy to license the book from me, and for them to handle the translation,
Hmm.
the editing, the cover. In fact, my new Albanian publisher, when I said to him, you know, in an email, I said, you know that you must do your own cover so we don't have confusion in the marketplace, even though it would be in Albanian. And he wrote back and said, you know, we work with excellent cover designers, so you know, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So that's the model that I still feel is the best, because you get money up front, and then they do all the heavy lifting,
Hmm.
and then in anywhere from 12 to 18 months you actually have the foreign edition. um, but you know, as I said, the co-op exhibits are a way to get a book exposed.
Hmm.
You know, there's a company called Dropcap that authors can look into to pay a fee to have even one book in their database that people can,
Yeah.
you know, find out about. People can email me, Hannah Croy at AOL.com, or
Hmm.
jyager at AOL.com, if they want to hear about my co-op exhibit down the road. I don't want to date your author's lounge, so I won't even say when the co-op will be, but you know, it's down the road.
For
So you know,
sure.
just contact me. If you go to my website, you can join my mailing list, or my contact us. So, you know, it's very exciting. You know, as I said, you know, and the interesting thing is that my translator in Copenhagen and we went back and forth. I can't tell you how many emails over whether it should be cantaloupe cat or catten,
Hmm.
Katten. You know, what would be the preferred version of cat in Danish? So,
Hmm.
so you know, translations. You know, it's a serious business, but it's very gratifying.
I'm glad that you had mentioned your website and how people can reach you, because that's actually what I was going to ask next as my final question was how can they reach you? But because you did it for me, thank you. So what I will do is
Sure.
I will ensure that the information you provided Those links will be in the description of the video and in the description of the audio recording of this, since this is going to be on multiple platforms for everyone to
Sure.
be able to.
And Osiris, I just want everyone to know that, even though I've written 66 books, it doesn't matter if you write one book or 5 books or 50 books or 100 books. The one book you're working on, whether it's your first or your, 10th, that's what's important.
Yeah.
And it's a legacy. It's a legacy. It's a legacy if it's nonfiction. It doesn't have to be a memoir legacy, but it could be a legacy of what you've learned in life. It could be a
Yeah.
legacy of your knowledge. If it's fiction, it could be a journey that, think of the novels that you've read over your lifetime that have influenced you. And, I just want people to feel, you can go into a bookstore, you can go into the library, and you can say to yourself, oh no, who needs my book?
Yeah.
There's so many books out there, but we do need your book.
Hmm.
Your book is your book. It's no one else's book.
Yep.
And even if you co-author, then it's your co-authored book. And
Exactly.
I'm so happy that I've been fortunate to have a wonderful husband and 2 children and grandchildren. But publishing books is definitely up there with, feeling like there's something I've contributed to the world.
For sure. Absolutely. Being able to immortalize yourself in that sense, and something that is a lasting, that is everlasting. Everyone means something to somebody else, right? Like, so whether you feel that you are somebody that's small and may not get heard, or you're somebody that you'll be heard by the millions, I think that it's just a matter of knowing what you have to say. Some people like the idea of being able to just to write a book just for the sake of saying I wrote a book. I think what matters more in that is having a message behind the story as to why you are writing the book to begin with. Whether it's a children's story, whether it's poetry, whether it is a horror book, or anything nonfiction related, having a having intentionality behind why you are even writing the book, I think it matters. And with that, I think that is where a lot of the inspiration to come that comes into fruition to say that this book matters. Whether it sells to 10 people or to 10 million people, the idea that you got your message out and you put it on paper and you're able to push it out into the masses, I think that's what matters most, more than anything. But hey, thank you so much, Dr. Yager, for coming on board. Before I let you go, you have any closing remarks?
Just that writing can be a very lonely profession, so reach out to other writers, join associations,
Hmm.
preferably those that not only have virtual networking events, but even if it's every couple of months, in person events.
Yeah.
Go to conferences, keep up in the field. But just know that we care. We care, and we want to help you. And just don't give up. You can write a book, over the weekend, or it can take 5 years, or somewhere in between. So this is your journey.
Yes.
But I think if you stick with it, you will find it worth it. My book, How to Finish Everything You Start, has a whole chapter on applying the finish system to finishing a book. But one of my favorite chapters in the book is about when it's okay to let things go, but for the right reasons.
Hmm.
So, not all books, sometimes you have to. I have unpublished books that maybe someday I'll get back to them, maybe I won't. But, do it for the right reasons.
Yes.
And I go into, don't do it because you're afraid of failure or fear of success. Make it happen because you know that it's worth doing.
Oh, that's beautifully said. I don't need to say anything else. Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Yager, for coming on board and for reaching out to me. And
Oh, thank you for responding. You're wonderful.
thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Osiris.
Oh, it's a blessing. Thank you so much for that. Hey, you all, I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. I hope you all continue to support the show and continue to support Dr. Jan Yager and her many projects that she will have coming on board. And hey, that's all I got for you all. So you all take some time to enjoy the remainder of your day, and I'll catch you next time. You all take care.